Hey everyone, and welcome to my map room. Today I'm going to talk to you about something that's really near and dear to my heart, my home state. But first, let's address something. I'm a denizen of the internet. I'm hip to the memes. I've seen the Vine. And so I know that for a good chunk of you, whenever you see anything about my home state, you are hearing a little voice in your head demanding America to explain. So let's lean into that situation. Let's talk about that. This will give me a chance to do two of my favorite things: talk about my home state and be needlessly pedantic about language. A theme song, isn't it a bit presumptuous to have a theme song for a first episode? Solid argument. Roll the theme sequence. Alright, let's talk about this word. The correct pronunciation of this word is Arkansas. But we're here to talk about why that's the correct pronunciation. So to understand that, we're going to need to go back in time a little bit, to the 17th century more specifically. Arkansas was once part of French territory in North America. Wanting to survey the land that they claimed, the French sent Father Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet to explore the territory between the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico. You will notice that Arkansas, along with the majority of the eastern United States, falls between the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico. Another thing that generally falls between the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico is the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River is one of the longest rivers in North America and has been a major transportation hub for people just about as long as there have been people on the North American continent. The Mississippi River also forms the eastern border of the modern state of Arkansas. So if you were a pair of 17th century explorers tasked with traveling from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, using the Mississippi River would be a pretty smart move. However, the French were far from the only people in the area, and as with modern day travel, it certainly makes things easier if you're traveling with someone who knows how to speak the local language. Marquette spoke many Native American languages, but most of them were in the Algonquian language family that is prevalent in the northern part of the United States and eastern Canada. They may have also employed the services of a guide from the Illini people of modern-day Illinois, who were more familiar with travel along the Mississippi River. The Illini spoke an Algonquian language that would have probably been understandable by Marquette. But do you know who didn't speak an Algonquian language? The Native Americans who lived in Arkansas, specifically the Quapaw, who lived along the Mississippi River in eastern Arkansas. Their language is Siouan, like many languages of the Great Plains and Prairie provinces. This meant that there was a bit of a language block between the French explorers and the people they encountered in modern-day Arkansas. The Quapaw had a name for themselves, Ogapa. However, Marquette and Joliet recorded them by a different name. This was based on an Algonquian word meaning downstream people, because they were the people who lived downstream from the Algonquian-speaking people of the Great Lakes region. 9 years later, in 1682, René Robert Cavelier Sieur de La Salle journeyed down the Mississippi River from the Great Lakes to modern-day southern Louisiana. He also encountered the Quapaw, and he wrote about them using this word. So it's not quite the same, but the same general idea, right? So let's do another time skip. We're going forward to 1721. We're still with the French, but this time it's Jean-Baptiste Bernard de la Harpe, the founding father of Little Rock. And he's going to go up a different river. What does he call the river? That's right. La Harpe uses the spelling that we use today. Do you know why he uses that spelling? Because it's a plural. But we're still speaking French, so we're not pronouncing that S on the end. Ready for another time skip? The year is 1811, and what was once French territory is now the American-owned Louisiana territory. We all know that Americans never botch foreign languages, right? I certainly haven't in this video. So let's see what explorer Zebulon Pike writes down as the name of the region he's exploring. Damn it. Okay. Okay, it's... At least we're still pronouncing it the same, right? And it's not an official name yet. We're still a few years out. It's not until 1819 that the area gets its own name, and that name is... Son of a... Alright, fine. At least we're pronouncing it correctly, right? You know, let's do one more time skip. Let's go forward to 1836. The United States is considering adding a new state. And what spelling did they use for this new state? That's right. They drop the W of the territorial name and they go back to the 1718 La Harpe spelling. Everything's settled, right? No, of course it's not settled. You can see how much time's left in the video. We've got a long way to go. It's definitely not settled. So what happens next? A pronunciation conflict is what happens next. And I was wrong before. We'll do one more time skip. We're gonna jump over the Civil War and we're gonna go to the year 1881. Arkansas has 2 senators in the United States Senate. They still do. Everyone has 2 senators in the United States Senate if you're a state. Anyways, guess what? They can't agree on the pronunciation of the name. They can't agree on the pronunciation of the name. God. So, of course they couldn't. What do? That's right, they take it to the state legislature. And instead of tossing the whole thing out because it's ridiculous, which it is, the state legislature makes a ruling. In 1881, the state decides that La Harpe had been right all along, and the name of the state is definitely, permanently, finally set as... And the pronunciation is set forever and ever by law as Arkansas. So that's that, right? Standardize the pronunciation, standardize the spelling. Surely that's enough grammar-based legislation for any state, right? No, of course it's not. What the heck, let's do one more time skip. Hold on, this is a big one. The year now is 2007, and people can't agree on the correct way to punctuate the possessive form of the state's name. Some argue that since it ends in an S, the correct way to punctuate the possessive form is Arkansas apostrophe. The same way that the New York Times believes that you should punctuate the possessive form of words like Pegasus or Kansas. Meanwhile, others argue that the vowel S at the end of Pegasus and Kansas is pronounced differently from the vowel S at the end of Arkansas, and therefore the possessive form should be punctuated differently as well. So they advocate a different punctuation form, and that is Arkansas apostrophe S. Since the final S in the name of the state is not pronounced, they believe there should be a second non-silent S at the end to make the S sound that comes with the possessive form of the state's name. Again, the state legislature takes over. They stepped in and decided that the proper possessive form is, there it is, Arkansas apostrophe S. That's it. Arkansas apostrophe S. We're linguistically set, aren't we, right? We've got the state's name, the way it's pronounced, the way it's spelled, and the punctuation of the possessive form. That's it, right? We're done. Yeah, yeah. I guess that's a valid question. What are people from Arkansas called? Guess what? People can't agree on that either. If you look it up, you're most likely to find this term, Arkansan. And I'll admit that's the term that I use. That's the term that most people use. That's sort of the standardized demonym for people from the state of Arkansas. However, it's far from the only one, and some people really don't like it. And do you know why they don't like it? Do you know what people from Kansas are called? Yeah, that's right. And if you'll remember from ages ago, you'll remember that Arkansas really doesn't like being pronounced the same way as Kansas. So maybe there's reason why people wouldn't want to be called something that implies our state's name should be pronounced like Kansas. But Arkansan, like I said, it's not the only name that's used for people from Arkansas, and it's also not the first name that's used for people from Arkansas. If you look it up, the first name that's being used to refer to a person or thing from Arkansas comes from a St. Louis newspaper in 1844, and that word is Arkansian. This name is still considered technically correct and is listed as a name for a person from Arkansas by the Oxford English Dictionary, but I have never met anyone who used this term. I have, however, met people who use this term, Arkansawyer, which is more consistent with the pronunciation of the state's name. It's also often favored by writers of prose and other creative types from Arkansas. Those who use it argue its use based more on connotation rather than any grammatical reasons. Many of them will argue that the name Arkansan is one that's given to people who live in Arkansas from those outside, whereas the name Arkansawyer is more representative of self-determination of a person from Arkansas. Whatever you call them, they're all residents of this place, my home state, and a place that you've just learned a little bit more about. Thanks for watching.